From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
After months of trouble with the Boeing jets it helps produce, Spirit Aerosystems announces incoming layoffs. Plus, a slew of new laws and new vetoes. Which ones will impact you? One for sure, no new tax cuts yet. The governor kept her promise of a veto, now a looming special session to try again. The ball's in the legislature's court now. What will lawmakers do? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. This is Kansas Week, and I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. Thursday afternoon, the governor announced she's vetoing 3 tax bills, just as she'd promised to, saying she'll announce a special session next week. In her veto, the governor wrote, "Kansans need responsible, comprehensive tax relief. As I said in my last veto statement of the legislature's nearly identical tax bill, I cannot sign into law a bill that jeopardizes our state's future fiscal stability. I have given the legislature several roadmaps to fiscally responsible tax cuts since January. Instead, they played political games with reckless tax policies, and I vetoed them. I said irresponsible tax policies would lead to a special session. So here we are. While I applaud the spirit of bipartisanship, this tax cut package passed at the 11th hour of the last day of the legislative session misses the mark." House Speaker Dan Hawkins called out the governor for her 4th tax cut veto, saying, "It's disappointing to see Governor Kelly turn her back on a 4th attempt at compromise and veto yet another sustainable bipartisan tax relief package, this time with a reduced fiscal note of only $3 million over her agreed number. Her gains, unfortunately, come at the expense of Kansas taxpayers, with an $84,000 a day special session and further delay of much-needed tax relief." The governor had threatened from the start of the year to call a special session if lawmakers refused to pass a tax plan she endorsed. Lawmakers now will have to suspend their re-election campaigns and return to Topeka to produce a plan the governor is willing to sign. They also could entertain other bills on any other subject matter, but it would mean starting from scratch with a new piece of legislation. All bills introduced over the last 2 years were voided when lawmakers adjourned the regular session. And joining us to tackle this and other issues, we have Sheila Kennard, a Wichita activist, Amy George Lumry with the Wichita Police and Fire Foundation, and on the other side of the table, State Representative Tom Sawyer, Wichita Democrat, and Wichita Republican, Speaker of the Kansas House, Representative Dan Hawkins, who we just heard from in that piece. I want to start off with, this is a case of governor versus legislature, not Republican versus Democrat.
That is correct. Tom and I have been working on this very, very hard. We started out this year trying to get a flat tax. That didn't work out very well. She vetoed that immediately, and from that point on, Tom, being the ranking Democrat of the tax committee, and Adam Smith, the chairman, they have worked tirelessly and really worked hard with the Senate, which is not easy, to come out with a tax package, and we've had 3 of them now. 2 of them were passed with unanimous votes on the House. And Tom, has that ever happened in your 30-some years?
No. We don't pass major tax bills unanimously. Never happens. No.
It's not. It surprised us both. It surprised us that there wasn't a Republican that didn't vote against it, or a Democrat. So that just shows you how solid the House is on what we've done. We believe that we have done the right thing, and I really want Tom to talk about it because he, the Democrat Party, they always say that we don't get along, and I think Tom will share with you a whole different version of what's going on up there.
Well, certainly you've been heavily promoting the tax cut bills on your social media accounts.
Sure. Yeah, it was a good bill. Look, as the speaker said, Chairman Smith and I got together after the flat tax went down and been working hard to come up with a good bipartisan proposal. And we talked to the chairman of the Appropriations Committee to make sure from a dollar standpoint what we can afford. And we all agreed that $500 million range was something that we could afford right now. So we started working with that. We came up with the first bill we put together, Senate Bill 230, which was right $501 million. It provides, it eliminates the tax on Social Security. It provides property tax relief, and income tax relief. And the part we worked hard on the income tax pieces. The biggest percentage cuts are at the bottom. You know, if people at the bottom, there are people that will get 100% tax cut at the bottom. You know, if you're a married couple making about $27,000 or less, you'd pay no state income tax in Kansas. And then everybody gets a tax cut, and the smallest percentages are at the top. You know, it keeps going down to about 2.3% for those at the top. So it's a very fair tax cut. And we thought, talking with the appropriations chairman, that it was an amount we could live with in Kansas, considering the $4.5 billion surplus we have right now. Obviously, that went down and was vetoed. We came back with another proposal that was a little lower, about $460 million, so about $40 million less. The governor vetoed that one. So then the last night of the session, we sat down and came up with one that was at $436 million, which is just, like as the speaker said, is about $3.5 million higher than what the governor said she would accept. So we thought we were pretty much there from the dollar amount, and then she, as we found out this week, vetoed it anyway.
I have a question. Why is it that you can't meet that dollar number for her? You're still $3.5 million off.
That's pretty close. I mean, it's hard, you know, when you're.
I know it's close, but
I mean, because we're talking
$25
billion in our all funds budget. So $3 million of is rounding error in Topeka. You know, because when we're sitting there trying to do a tax proposal, like we were, the top rate in the proposal we were cutting from was 5.6. So he said, well, or 5.55.
5.5.
So if we go to 5.57, you know, the middle, the bottom bracket was 5.2. If we go to, or 5.15, we go to 5.2. I mean, when you mess with those, I mean, $3 million is extremely close.
Okay.
And at the time we were discussing it in conference, we didn't have exact numbers anyway. So we thought maybe we were right on the mark. We weren't quite sure how close we were.
When you're trying to, that's a wavy line.
Right.
Okay. And so you're trying to make sure everybody gets a tax cut, and the lower side actually gets 100% tax cut. One little 100th can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so adjusting those are difficult, and they work really, really hard trying to make sure that they get it. Quite frankly, we have, you know, the governor has said over and over and over again, she would accept anything but a flat tax. So our next one was a dual rate tax. She vetoed that. Our next one was a dual rate tax, which is even lower. Every time she would give us a bar, we would meet her, and she'd change the goalpost right when we got there and say, no, we're going to veto that. And that's what's happening right now in this one. We are as close as we've ever been to the governor, and she gave us a figure. Now all of a sudden that figure's changed to 100 million less. How do we ever get, you know, when you're trying to negotiate with somebody and you're trying to work through this situation, and that person keeps changing the goal, moving the goalpost, how do we get there? And that's, our tax people are so frustrated because they've worked so hard, and then all of a sudden it changes again.
So what's your next step?
We go back to special session. The governor vetoed the bill yesterday, Thursday. It was actually the last day for her to take that action. She vetoed it. She'll call a special session at some point in time. We don't know when. She says next week sometime, but we don't know what the date will be. That is her only option, is to call a special session. And that's where her part stops. She doesn't get any other part of that. It's up to us how long we stay there. It's up to us what we do.
That's why you said you weren't sure if you're going to be able to take your vacation.
I know.
in June,
I can't plan anything. I can't meetings anything in June because I don't know when the special session's going to be.
Okay.
Yeah,
Especially being on tax, I'm going to be very involved.
Well,
So.
and for us, we sent out an email to all of our people saying, okay, what days are you going to be there? I've talked to my fellow members on the Democrat side and said, how are you guys doing? We're going to be 10 short on our side any day of the week during June. They're going to be probably 5, I've been told 5 to 6 short.
Because of people being out.
That's right. Yeah. So we're 15 or 16, 17 people short every single day of June.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have a question for you ladies. How much does it matter to you if the state comes up with a tax cut, and if the legislature meets this minimum that the governor has set?
You know, hearing these guys talk about it illuminates it for me, because I heard the veto and I thought, okay. But now I see the intricacies of it, and I understand better the intricacies of it and how hard you guys work to get it. And my thought is, why does she veto? you know. And I heard her reason about fiscal responsibility or something, but it seems that you all are fiscally responsible, and you've worked across the aisle to make it happen. So maybe I'll just send up a good prayer, okay? That's something I can do. I can just pray for the sister.
Well, I always say we can use all the
prayers you can get. Yeah.
Well, it is for the betterment of the overall good. So we appreciate what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And pushing it to make it the best that it can be for everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, when we go back, you're going to see a lot the same. You're going to see Republicans and Democrats working together. You'll see Adam Smith and Tom Sawyer working their hearts out to get everything done. And I would bet when the vote comes out, it's probably going to be pretty close to the last one, which it wasn't unanimous, but it was 108 votes on the House side. And I bet you the next one will be very close to that.
That's great.
Well, we're going to leave the tax talk there because that wasn't the only bill the governor vetoed this last week. She also signed several long-awaited bills as well. Let's start with the sole family permanency option, which allows teens 16 or older in foster care to obtain legal permanency, a term for legally recognized family-like relationships, and then transition into adulthood through a custodian of their choice. That's now law. Also now law, a drug overdose prevention measure that will no longer criminalize Kansans who seek help for themselves or others during overdoses. Vetoed in the last week, however, a bill preventing other nations from owning land in Kansas near military installations, and one that would have required future dads to begin paying child support from conception rather than birth. And finally, the governor vetoed Wednesday a bill that would have let schools use AI systems to detect weapons on campus. Now, that bill was vetoed because the governor said it limited competition, but essentially only allowing one company to do the job. And there was also signing into law the K-12 budget and the special education budget. Those are some of the big headlines. What am I missing? What else vetoed or signed that do you guys think is important this week?
Well, obviously the K-12 budget was a very important one. We were fully funding schools again, and we're putting in more money into special education. So we put $75 million more into special ed, getting closer to fully funding special ed as well. So that to me is very, very important. So I don't want to overlook that. And actually a couple of other bills she signed that you mentioned are extremely important too. I think the foster care one is big. I think that's huge, letting the kids over 16, be able to decide a family member they want to be with or somebody else. It doesn't even have to be a family member. I think that's huge. That's a huge change that I'm glad to see. And actually the Good Samaritan law too. If somebody has a drug overdose in Kansas before this law,
They were criminalized.
Yes, they would be criminalized. So if somebody was with them, they were probably doing drugs too. They call the police. They won't want to call the police because they'll be put in jail. So I think it's a lot of states have had Good Samaritan laws. I think it's high time we passed in Kansas. So I do think those were all very good.
What are your thoughts? What do you think is the biggest headline out of those?
I know the foster care system is it needed help.
Yeah.
And so I think that law really will go far to help young people. Can they be emancipated at that time or not? They have to be 18 to be emancipated.
They have to be 18, but it puts them on path to do that.
Yes.
In a way that.
And they'll be with somebody that they choose to be with.
Exactly.
And then they can be emancipated after that. Excellent. Yeah.
Well, weren't some of these vetoes done just because of some select wording that was in?
Yeah, I mean, some of the.
There were a couple, weren't there? Just very minute changes that needed to be on the wording, besides the competition on one. But there were a couple of. I thought I read.
Well, yeah,
that
I mean, there was.
somewhere that
I think one she
wording.
mentioned the fact that the competition on one that, well, the way it was written, that she thought it would only allow one company to do it, and that is a legitimate concern. The foreign adversary one is one of the problems I think with the bill is it's 150 miles. Well, in Kansas, with all the different places we have, that's pretty much the whole state. You're going to be with 150 miles of.
We moved it to 100.
Oh, do we move it to 100? Okay, all right. Well,
So there's
it's
small
still,
cracks
it's
in
still,
between.
it's still right, but it's still a lot of the states. So, and she expressed concerns that she was worried about the constitutionality of that one, and I think that is one that will go through the courts. So, I'm trying to remember some of our other vetoes. But yeah, I mean, in some cases it was small things.
Yeah, it was very minute on a few items. I hope they go.
We've had so many vetoes. You know, this year she's almost approached Joan Finney, which I wasn't around, but Tom was. Tom knows Joan. Joan had 27 in 1 year.
I don't think there's anything wrong with her expecting it to be better or the best that it could be, as long as you're working together.
I think if you were there and you saw the work was put in, you would feel like, especially when you get big bipartisan votes. It's one thing when it's just a party line vote, kind of expect something to happen. But if you look at our votes this year, some of our biggest stuff was hugely bipartisan, massive bipartisan votes, and then she vetoes them. And you know, that gets a little old when you see that happen.
An interesting thing about this latest set of vetoes is that because you guys adjourned sine die, basically, you're done for the year. Yeah. There is no chance to overturn it this latest round.
Right.
No, we can't go back. There's been emails to me saying go back during special session and override the vetoes. No, we can't do that. Once we leave sine die, we're done for the year. The only way we come back is a special session, and then we start anew.
Yeah, it's a whole separate session.
Absolutely, and Tom mentioned it earlier that we could do anything we want. Now, I can tell you both sides are going to work very hard to keep it just a tax. You don't want to open that up, because when you do, we could be there for weeks.
Yes.
And there have been some special sessions where they've been there for weeks. It's better if we just go in, do what we're there to do, and go back home.
I think that's what most voters pretty much want.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, in other news, Spirit Aerosystems this week notified workers that it would be laying off several hundred of them. This after a recent slowdown in the delivery rate of its commercial program. KSN's Derek Lytle takes a look.
We've not seen a layoff of 450 employees here in quite a long time.
Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell says Wichita's been on an aviation roller coaster for decades, but that Spirit's been fairly stable. He thinks these employees may decide to head out of state to similar jobs looking to hire now.
May make a decision to sell their home, move someplace like Georgia or North Carolina or someplace, or California that has lots of manufacturing.
Howell believes this move causes harm to the Wichita economy.
Every one of these jobs has, 3 or 4, even maybe sometimes in some cases 5 jobs in the community that are impacted by the flowing of those dollars to this economy. So it's going to have a ripple effect.
Senior contributing analyst for the Teal Group, Bruce McClellan, says the move is puzzling.
It doesn't seem like this is the time to be laying people off.
He says the decision may be tied to the acquisition of Spirit by Boeing, adding they'll need that workforce back to meet future expectations.
Boeing has aspirations to go to 50 units a month. I believe it's 2025, 2026. They're going to need certainly their skilled workers.
Howell says the aviation industry is thriving as a whole, and he hopes that those laid off will choose local companies like Textron. Here for you in Wichita, Derek Lytle, KSN News 3.
And Textron did recently say that they are in a very good position right now as far as sales being stable and workforce, etc. But really, I mean, if you've lived in Wichita for more than a decade, you know that we go through these where you have massive layoffs every once in a while, but it's never pleasant.
No, and in fact, at Love Field in Dallas, Elliott Aviation just had to close completely a facility. We don't want ours to close completely. So if we need to do a few layoffs to keep this vibrant for years to come, we need to do what we need to do. But it's going to hurt Wichita. It always does. It's going to trickle down. I run a nonprofit. That's going to affect me also. It's going to affect how much groceries are bought. It's going to affect everybody.
And just how many people can just pick up and move like that, take their whole family, their house and all of that, and just it's upsetting.
Yes.
To me.
It is. It disturbs
and I remember
the whole community.
Boeing always being the premier employer in the city. My dad was a physician, and Boeing had the best contract. I mean, the people would come in, they had Blue Cross Blue Shield Boeing, it was Cadillac, okay? It was the top of the line. And they have slowly lost so much of their the strong contract that they had, you know. And then the whole what do you call it? Their quality control.
Yes.
That has a lot to do with it.
Oh yeah, that's a big reason why they're having these problems.
The whole recent debacles with safety.
Yeah.
So and I hope they do keep the skilled workers so that they can get back on track.
Absolutely.
Get back on track.
Well, and I do hope they stay in Wichita. I mean, it's encouraging. Maybe a text run maybe could pick up some of those people, because one thing that's, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, you know, this used to happen a lot. In fact, many thousands would be laid off. I mean, this number is much smaller than we used to deal with. But back then, there wasn't so much competition from around the country. You know, right now there are a lot of places that skilled workers can go to, and my fear is we don't want to lose them. So hopefully, they can go to Textron or some other Wichita company. They can stay here, because we're going to need them in the long run.
I don't think that this was the first one, because I do believe that NIAR was not hiring, or we're having some layoffs, and there was another one also. So it kind of seems that it's the economy right now with the competition that's out there.
It's the biggest one in a while.
It's the biggest one, yes.
And it is indubitably a direct result of the issues that Boeing has been having with their quality control.
So do we know, are all of the other facilities hiring currently? I haven't checked into that. I would like to know.
Textron is doing pretty well. We know that.
That's great.
Is Textron actively recruiting those people that are going to be laid off, you think?
Well,
we'll see.
Exactly. The announcement just came out
we
24
shall
hours
see.
before we recorded, so
we shall see.
Lots to wait and see on that.
I think you also need to keep in mind that there's services out there available to help these folks, and you're going to see stuff from the state, certainly stuff for the city and county. There will be a lot of help for those folks to keep them here. We don't want to lose them, because, quite frankly, you know, we believe that Boeing is coming back, that they're certainly looking at buying Spirit, and when that happens, that's going to be good, I think, for the city. That'll give us a chance to grow the aviation sector even more.
Yeah.
So I really think we got to really be careful of having this knee-jerk reaction that all of a sudden bad things are happening. I actually think that this may be just a blip. I think more so from the 737 MAX and some of those things than anything.
Of course, and we have to keep in mind that is looking at it from the big picture perspective, not from the individual perspective of those who are looking at losing their jobs, which this is going to be a very difficult, you know, summer for them. All right. Well, for those still working, child care costs can be a problem. A recent study showed Kansas is one of 11 states where child care for two is at least double the cost of rent. KAKE's Leon Purvis looks at why.
The price of child care has to go up because everything else has gone up also. So in order for us to pay our employees a decent wage, we have to go up on our prices.
Margot Jones is the owner and CEO of Kids World Child Care Learning Center in North Wichita. Her facility is licensed for 59 kids. To get them quality care before they start school, Jones says she has to pay her employees at least $11 an hour, so she has to charge parents more. Her prices for infants, $1,200 a month. As your kid gets older, it does get slightly less expensive, but only as low as $840 a month if your child is 4 or 5.
We have to be able to charge enough to pay overhead. You got expenses, taxes, and all that stuff that takes care. You know, we have to put all that into a business as well as paying our employees.
Child Care Aware of America's latest annual report released Wednesday shows if you have 2 kids and live in one of 11 states or Washington, D.C., including Kansas, child care costs at least twice as much as rent. Government assistance helps Kids World with expenses, but it's still hard for parents to afford daycare.
If we were paying the sticker price of childcare and we weren't getting some of that help, it would be twice what our rent is, even at a more affordable daycare.
Rebecca Sturgill says it's a decision between growing her career or staying at home to take care of cash.
We're already really plugged in with a lot of our jobs. My husband and I are both teachers. So do we have the extra income and then use it towards childcare? Do we give up some of those really precious things in helping our community and staying home?
Jones adds, compared to other places in Kansas, living in Wichita is affordable.
If you try some other places like Overland Park and Kansas City, their prices are even higher because their wages are higher.
Yeah, and those prices are really hard to wrap your mind around. Now, I know you guys were working on some legislation the last couple of years. Where does that stand?
Actually, we had our Commerce Committee worked extensively on child care this time, this last session. Tory Blue was one of the Republicans, I believe. Jason Probst on the Democrat side worked very, very hard on that. They worked together. We passed it. We passed it out of the House, went to the Senate, and it never did make it out of the Senate.
Speaking of Tory Blue, congratulations to her. She just had her own little baby bundle of joy there, so yay.
Yep.
But that is one of the things as I've talked to parents, they've talked about the cost, they've talked about the lack of availability. When I've talked to daycare centers and other child care providers, they've talked about the regulations involved and how that keeps causing problems.
As a grandparent, I've had to help. I have to help watch my grandchildren because it is so expensive right now. It really is. And I want you to mention Storytime.
Storytime Village. My girlfriend, Dr. Prisca Barnes, just received a huge grant, and she's going to build on 16th and Holyoke a child literacy center. But it's down the road a bit.
Yeah.
But she's going to have a daycare center in there and hire a slew of people and have a place where kids can come and you know, be boasted in their literacy. But it's down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. There are lots of different ideas, but a lot of them down the road.
And we need them now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Businesses need them now. I mean, I've talked to many employers that say they can't hire people because those folks either won't come to Kansas because they can't afford childcare, or if they're in Kansas, one of the parents simply won't join the workforce because it's cheaper for them to stay home.
Well, part of what we were trying to do this year was to change the ratio so we could have more slots. And I think that's actually what hung it up in the Senate. They did not like that at all.
All right, we're going to have to leave the discussion there. We are out of time. I told you it would run so quickly.
This is great.
Thank you all so much for joining me, and thank you as well. We'd also like to thank our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, KSN News, and Cake News for sharing their materials with us. We hope you found our discussion helpful. We'd love to continue it with you on social media. Just look for Pilar Pedraza TV or PBS Kansas on most platforms. For now, stay safe and have a great week.